everybody, welcome back to Capricorn Radio TV. This is your host James, and I'm pumped. I'm super excited with today's show. I have on the call with me Jim Vieira and Mr. Hugh Newman. Their new book, Giants on Record, is out, and I can't wait to review this book today. I've been so excited all week with this one. Two of my favorite researchers, and I have them both on the same show talking about their joint book. A little bit about you, not to get complacent with returning guests. A good friend of the show, an explorer, antiquarian, author of Earth Grids. He's been a regular guest on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens for the last 5 seasons. Also been in Search of the Lost Giants, which I caught with Jim and Bill Vieira. 2006, he's organised a Megalithomania conference, still running today. A veteran of megalithic research that runs in the UK, US and South Africa. Obviously runs tours around the world as well, with Peru, Egypt, Turkey, Britain, Mexico, Cambodia, India, Java, mostly with Andrew Collins from the Origins Conference, another good friend of the show. And now knee-deep in megalithic research as well as giants research. A little bit about Jim Vieira before I bring him on. Stonemason, researcher and writer. First came across Jim with the TEDx talk, like most people. Fascinating research Jim is into, exploring and writing with the stone sites of New England, collating some 1,500 newspaper and scholarly accounts of giant skeletons being found in North America around the world. Written for the Ancient American magazine, The Heretic, and local Massachusetts newspapers. And these two guys have now teamed up, and pardon the pun, but titans in the field of giants research. So without further ado, I think I'll bring on you first. Hi, you. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, James. Great to be back.
And Jim, give us your voice there, Jim.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's funny. I don't know. We've tried to get together for so long, but it seems synchronistic that it's happening now.
Yeah, it's a great time to be together, guys. I mean, wow, I thoroughly enjoyed the book, guys, and I think it's an awesome compendium, and I think it's an essential read. It's one of those books that grabs your attention because it's got this, oh, there we go, you're a good man. It's an essential read. I think you guys have done a credit to this area of research, and you haven't gone about it in an obvious way. You've gone about it in the right way, which is to show it as a compendium from all the articles and the research and how you guys have discovered this stuff, and both from an objective perspective and both from your own areas of expertise meeting together. I guess you first, I tell us how you guys met and why the collaboration, how that first came about, you.
Yeah, sure. We met I think we met for the first time actually at a Megalithomania conference that I put on in Connecticut, very close to Massachusetts actually. And Jim came along to it. I think he was in touch with me briefly before that, discussing the stone sites of New England, which I've been fascinated with since I first went there in 2008. But we met there. Ross was speaking there. Ross Hamilton, he's become like a mentor to both me and Jim. Ross was Skyping in to do the lecture. He couldn't make it physically, but we all kind of connected, and it really opened up from there. I mean, since then, I've been continuing my research in New England, and it was back then when we were all starting to really realise what was going on with this giant story. And then me and Jim kind of just connected, and we hung out the next time I was in New England, and immediately we realised we should be doing a book together. It was pretty quick. He'd started doing the Daily Giant blog post, one post a day for almost 2 years, which I'm sure he could tell you about, and that became a kind of phenomenon. And I started following that intensely, and I was like, "Whoa, this guy's got some good research here." I was already aware of what was going on in America. I'd read all Ross Hamilton's work and various other people's. So yes, we just put our heads together and decided we thought we could put something together that was better than what had been put out before, or just a more organised kind of way of presenting it. And we'd found accounts no one had ever seen before, so we were quite excited by the whole prospect, and that's now ended up as this.
Wow. And it's in print, guys. I'm so happy to see this. I know it's been coming for a while. Jim, bring us in there, brother. Great to hear your voice. Great to see you teamed up with you. Tell me about, first of all, I got to mention the TEDx talk. I mean, we won't spend too much time on it. I know you've done this a lot on shows, but it's necessary. I think Jim, they've done the exact opposite. They've just created more hype about this this TEDx business. They've got the worst tactics in the world, I think.
Well, I think that happens when anybody can sense some suppression of information happening.
Mm.
And the thing that was funny is that my talk wasn't about drawing scientific conclusions or stating a case, of, I have some proof for this to be real. It's more like historical detective work and sharing it with people. Like, wow, don't you find this interesting that all around the country you have similar accounts of enormous skeletons being unearthed with the same strange anatomic anomalies and an era of inefficient communication by noted historians and scholars, and they're all saying the same things in a way that shouldn't be known about it. It's like, isn't that interesting? And for me, I think it was the end. I went on this rant about the Koch brothers and the Smithsonian. The previous speaker is a guy named Dean Sytoon. He owns Dean's Beans, and he's into sustainable agriculture. He goes to different, like indigenous people around the world and works with them to have them earn a fair wage. And he talks about, because he's a CEO for his company, he meets CEOs everywhere, and they all operate sociopathically, although they seem like normal people, was kind of his take. And so I got in that mode. I had just written an article about the Smithsonian and, their misdeeds. And so I went on this rant because they're receiving like millions and millions of dollars to obfuscate history, to twist and turn and claim that nobody knows what global warming is about. So I was in my rant mode, and I really think with phony corporate culture, especially in the U.S. for the last 30 years, people never hear the truth about anything. They don't hear anything objective or critical, especially about corporations. And I think it just struck a nerve with people, like, wow, this dude's going to get whacked. I can't believe somebody's actually saying something that has factual content that is so on spot. So it was taken down. It had a negative effect. We met with producers from Left Right Studios who thought it'd be a good story to investigate giant accounts. I had already teamed up with Hugh. And the good thing is that we've taken so long with the book. This has been several years. You can't believe the thousands of hours poured into it. And we are not interested in anything but creating, kind of a work of art, something people can read and just really be enthralled with and take up the research themselves. We think that we've come up with something that's quite good.
Sure. I don't say that lightly. I think it's an essential read. I think there's a vital piece of body of evidence there, and it was calling for it. It definitely was. So I think it's one of those books that needs to be on the shelf for reference material at the very least. And I don't say that about many books. I guess, Jim, I think what I liked about your TEDx talks was that you can say whatever you want about Jim Vieira, okay? You can say you don't like the giant stuff. You can say, but give Jim Vieira the benefit of watching his TEDx talk or his speech first or his presentation, because I think what is great about your work, Jim, is that you're very clear, you're very concise, methodical, well researched. And you've gone out looking for this stuff, and you've gone either to the archives or you've gone to the stone chambers of New England, and you've done your time, you've done your work, and you've done your research. So I know that was my attention. You can say whatever you want about the personality, and you can try and squash a story, or you can say whatever you want, but be fair and give your time and look at the research first. So I mean,
I appreciate that. I studied economics at UMass with my brother, and basically just became a historical detective about 25 years ago. It's just something I enjoy. I think it's fascinating. And I try to be objective. I definitely, I've been wrong. I admit I'm wrong. Experimentation is what we do. Like, hey, this would be a good experiment. I've done my research. I've done my homework, frankly, and Hugh has too. We've read through enormous amounts of orthodox anthropological and archaeological literature. In 2 shows now, I've worked with archaeological teams. Tomorrow night, actually, Roanoke, Search for the Lost Colonies, a 2-hour special my brother and I did for the History Channel. And certainly Hugh has done. I'm really glad to come together with Hugh, because he's like me. He's a freak. He can remember vast amounts of information, organize them, make them, understandable like take it all together and just make a logical argument. And the argument we make is not that this is real, that's real. It's more, it's worthy of further investigation. And anybody who reads our book and claims otherwise is lying. Because if you look at like some of the most respected people through the history of this is just North America. You're working on a worldwide Giants book now. It's the same thing. Some of the most respected people, presidents, ethnological leaders of the age are all claiming the same thing. Essentially, it's unbelievable. So of course, we'd love to find the 10-foot skeleton in some basement of some Illuminati freak, but until that happens, I think it's worthy of further investigation.
Sure, and I'm going to bring in your brother Bill in a minute on the Lost Giant show. I want to give credit to Bill too, because I know he's been with you on some of this journey too. You tell us about your part of the journey. I know the answer. I know you're coming at this from megaliths, but for the benefit of the audience, you're coming at this from a megalithic perspective, primary first, and then maybe just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, I'm a sort of hardened megalithomaniac. That hasn't changed for a decade or so. But the more you look into these sites, especially as you know, especially in Britain and Europe, and even in my local areas, you do find evidence and legends of giants. You do find accounts written several hundred years ago that talk of actual skeletons being discovered and measured, and even on display at certain places. So there is a story there. I mean, I didn't really have any interest in this giants thing. I mean, I knew about British giants, the legends, Gog Magog and so forth. But it was really when I went to America, and I actually stayed at David Hatch Childress's house in Arizona, of all places. And he had a remarkable library that he was away in Nepal at the time, but he let me house sit while I was doing some research traveling back in 2008, I think.
Private access to the library,
but in that library was the classic book that kind of triggered everything for me, which was A Tradition of Giants by Ross Hamilton.
Wow.
And I read the whole thing immediately. It almost fell off the shelf in front of me. It was one of those sort of days when things like that happen. And it turned my whole mind, turned my whole perspective around, realizing that this giant thing is for real. There's no way this could all be made up, what is presented in this book. And it triggered something in me. It really moved something. And that's what got me into it. And I have to thank Ross Hamilton, who's also been a brilliant. He's been mentoring and working with us on this book and on the research and the TV show. And so we want to give him very high praise and credit for what he's done over the years. And he's been getting it in the neck. People have been giving him a hard time, calling him, names about, because of this research. It's so controversial. But he was really the one, actually, along with David Hatch Childress, because that really opened up the idea that the Smithsonian, there's something wrong in the Smithsonian. It was an article David Childress done back in 1993, I think, called Smithsonian Gate, which didn't mention the giants, but it mentioned many accounts, discoveries in the Grand Canyon discovery and things like this. And so there's it was really, but when I was in America back then, I checked out a few sites, Lompoc Rancho, which is supposed to have a 12-foot giant with double rows of teeth. I checked out a few sites in Arizona. Eventually I got back to Ohio in 2012 and did a whole tour around all the sites in the Ohio Valley, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, etc., and investigated tons of sites, museums. I was with Ross Hamilton. We stayed at his house for a bit, and the brilliant Jeffrey Wilson as well. So it really has become one of those things. I thought megaliths was my life, but actually now it's megaliths and giants.
Awesome, Hugh. I was in Holland, and in the Drenthe region, they call the megalithic chambers there Hunnebedden, which basically means giant's bed. But when they translate it into English for us, they call them passage tombs or megalithic chambers, but they're translating what they physically are, but not what the actual literal translation is, which is giant's grave. And this name is synonymous with these monuments. And I just find that remarkable that it's like it's there in our background, and we have enough trouble with the megaliths trying to figure this puzzle out.
Well, let me just tell you one example. I mean, like this, I've mentioned this in previous interviews, but I think it's a very interesting point. Stonehenge. Everyone thinks Stonehenge is the original name of the stone circle. It used to be called the Giant's Dance.
Wow.
That's what it was called for as long as anyone can remember. And there's legends going back to the 1100s, thanks to Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, who pronounced that it was called the Giant Stone. He has Merlin having a giant helping bring the stones over from Ireland. It originally came from North Africa, and so on and so forth. So there's giant legends at the most popular, probably the most popular archaeological site in the world, next to the pyramids, Stonehenge in England. The name used to be the Giant Stance, and people just don't realise that. And the fact that in that area you found certain mounds have had very large bones and skeletons found within them. You have to question again what's going on here. What's happening here, because that's just one example of many thousands.
Sure. I'm glad you mentioned Ross there. I actually had Ross on not a few weeks ago for Capricorn TV. I did an interview with him, and I love Ross's work. He was a pioneer for me as well from a lot of research, and I just think he has provided a wealth on Serpent Mound. He's provided an insight into something that we just wouldn't have without him. And he's a great researcher. And you can say, and this is kind of pertinent to you guys, you can say whatever you want about the person, but let the research stand for itself. And usually what you find is that the people get attacked, or the personalities get attacked, instead of the work. When you can't attack the research and you can't attack the work, it's like they come at you or the person. And I think you guys might find that. I don't know if you guys have any personal accounts of that. Maybe you, Jim. I don't know. Do you get attacked for this research?
Oh, sure. Usually in terms of my credentialing, he's not an archaeologist, but I've never claimed to be. I work with archaeologists. I work with anthropologists. I could undertake a dig myself, but it wouldn't be appropriate. I always, engage professionals when I'm exploring anything, and Hugh does the same, and friends of ours like Greg Little, who's a great researcher about the mound cultures, does the same. And, I think that the point is that we come from, we bring a holistic approach to these mysteries. We don't just come from one angle. And a physical anthropologist will just say, I need to see blank, but they won't be able to comment on, hey, do you know there's 17 accounts, at least in the Smithsonian records, of 7 foot and taller skeletons?
Wow.
Sometimes 7'6", sometimes close to 8 foot. A 36-inch circumference skull found in 1873 in Alton, Illinois. It's like, really? How do you answer that? And just like we had Todd Disclosed on the show, who I'm friends with and I like, but he's just like, he started talking about in the Middle Ages, people would talk about people with faces in the middle of their chest or 3 heads or whatever. I'm like, no, this is professionals of the time examining skeletons that didn't get up and move around. To us, it's very compelling, and we bring a holistic approach in. And this trolls like Jason Colavito and other people.
Oh God, don't.
Frankly, he's very bright, but the point is he's not objective. He is he acts like a troll that, like, these people, they can't get off, their brains don't make enough dopamine, so they literally just try to insult people to get a rise out of them. Instead of saying, well, that's a reasonable case, but we need more evidence. No, they go and they attack you, and they're quite odd. I was almost naive when I get involved. I thought everybody would be behind this, wow, isn't this interesting, But to speak about Ross Hamilton, what's interesting is he's worked with Native Americans, and we come at this thing from many angles. Like the esoterics, Edgar Casey, Steiner, Madame Blavatsky, Rosicrucians or Freemasons all talk about giants existing as a historical fact. The Native American legends talk about it. Every early explorer you can name encountered giant people that they chronicled about. The great chroniclers of the age, the presidents, the records everywhere. So we come from all these different perspectives to say, it looks like something's going on here.
There is something majestic in the land of Ireland. This is known the world over. The Celtic Irish are descendants of the Tuatha De Danann, a mysterious, supernatural race of gods written about in ancient Irish Gaelic texts. This is the basis for all Irish mythology, and our megalithic ancestors are interlinked with these peoples. You have a chance to come and see these monuments and temples for yourself. the megalithic landscape is rich in the realms of myth, legend and wisdom. Come see all this on the most spectacular Sacred Sites tour in March 2016. The Sacred Sites and Equinox tour is not to be missed. Tour highlights include Grinning of Ailloch Observatory, the Giant's Ring Henge and Dolmen, St. Patrick's Day special at St. Patrick's Ancient Chair, March 17th, Knockmany Passage Tomb linked to the Queen Maeve with special access, Beemore Temple Complex, Dunluce Castle, the Giant's Causeway, Beltany Stone Circle, Kilclooney Dolmen, and the Loch Crew Equinox event alignment. Of course, we will see the famous tombs of Newgrange, Noath and Doath, also Fornox Rock Art and Shamanic Chamber, Tara Hill Complex, and we're going to finish at the Tua de Danan's origins in the northwest of Ireland at Carrowkeel, dated 3500 BC, and the famous Carrowmore 5000 BC complex. Check out all the full itinerary on the Tours Events page for more details at jamesswagger.com.
Rooms, right? And then you got the inner sanctum.
You can see where this was probably covered over. This overlap here. It would have corbel vaulted and overlapped this chamber here. So this would have had a covering. This would have had a covering. And this is all just backfilled to make the mound up, which has been reduced down to nearly ground level. I think the phoenix is rising for sure. I think we're coming back to a new era of research and information, and it's just I think it's like the dam is about to burst and the truth is just coming, and it's just a matter of time, and the cracks in the dam are there. I guess, Jim, when you talk about the Smithsonian files, I mean, has anybody gone? I mean, you two guys in particular, have you gone to the Smithsonian and say, can you give me a statement on these Smithsonian files? Will they give you a statement? Will they even talk to you?
The statement received was that, from me, Hugh went in person, it was just that these, the scientists at the time did not accurately measure the bones. The largest skeleton they have is a Sioux Native American with pituitary gigantism that is 6'3". And really that, you know, giants don't exist, and this is like folk legend and things like that. And, you know, it's frustrating. For us, Hugh and I kind of point to, you know, an age 80, 90 years ago when there was a particularly zealous racist head of anthropology, Dr. Hrdlicka. There was actually Smithsonian scientists who were interested in giants, who had found them, who talked about them, like Professor McGee, who was seemed to be forced out. Hrdlicka came in and he didn't believe that anybody was in the U.S. before 2000 BC, later proven wrong. He believed in hyper-isolationism, later proven wrong. He wrote actively about Native Americans and African Americans being inferior to whites, and you know, that the greatest danger, he wrote in the scientific journal, his own journal of anthropology, was the African American inferior blood mixing with superior white blood. He sounded like Hitler-esque. So you had a lunatic basically running the, you know, not that he didn't know his craft, but you had these racist attitudes. And giants were a part of saying that Native Americans had a kind of a glorious empire that was really amazing. And what we think and what we learn about Native American cultures are they're disorganized, they're not very sophisticated, but they were building massive geometric forms. Their grasp of engineering and geometry was astounding, and their spiritual culture was very, you know, was of a high level. But we don't find that. We find like these are native, these are savage indigenous people that are really disorganized. And then when you start talking about like at every major mound site in the U.S., especially in the East, there was a giant skeleton account associated with it, buried in a stone chamber or a log chamber or a log tomb. So that became part of disintegrating, destroying native culture. You cannot glorify and destroy culture at the same time. And the manifest destiny attitudes were to basically dehumanize Native Americans and to offer bounties on their heads out west, like $5 a head, if you can believe it, for like Native Americans who were killed. It's like that prevailing attitude has really, you know, stifled a lot of this research.
Wow. That's incredible. You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's an accurate depiction of the history that people don't want to talk about, Jim. And fair play to you for saying that. And I know there's a lot of people. It doesn't matter what history, Irish, English, American. There's nasty parts to history. I mean, history it's in the past, though. It is in the past. Let's not forget that. I mean, some people just don't want to talk about it like it's a taboo thing, and I think it's right to talk about it and at least honor the truth of history with an accurate depiction. So fair play to that, Jim. Let's bring in the megaliths for a moment here, because Jim was alluding to sacred geometry there, or these geometrical forms in the henges, and it seems to be synonymous with the giants of America, at the mound builders anyway. Let's transplant that over to the British Isles. We seem to have all this complex geometry going on as well. It's a large portion of megalithic architecture that it's like only the chosen few try to do or crack this. It's like it's a system of knowledge that's so incredible. Everybody wants to, you know, find an alignment, or everybody wants to look at the astronomy or the acoustics even, but very few want to look at the complex geometry. It's a tough task, I think.
No, I agree. Yeah, I mean, you do find that all over the world, to be honest with you, as you probably know. But yeah, in England, you get geometrical earthworks like you do in North America. The ones in North America are very, very interesting if you're just looking at specific earthworks. For example, you have the Newark earthworks, and you have other ones around Chillicothe. You have even Serpent Mound has hidden geometries and alignments in the curves of the actual serpent shape. And so you do find examples of, there are serpent effigies being found in Scotland, for instance.
Oh yeah.
There's and you do find the same kind of geometric earthworks in various places. You find perfect circles like you get at Stonehenge, you get in North America, but often you get with the sites in, especially in the Ohio Valley, the mound culture sites. And the further kind of east you go, you do start to find megalithic construction, often within the mounds as well. You do find chambers, you do find roof slabs, passages, and things like this, especially in the mound culture. But when you get to the east side, which is where Jim's based, and which I've been researching for several years, you do find what appears to be European-style megalithic structures. Which that doesn't really make sense. I mean, even on the opposite side of the country, on in the Channel Islands off the coast of California, there's a report from the 1600s of a stone circle type structure on Catalina Island, and it was part of a wider complex that stretched for 2 miles. And there was a sun god effigy there, and all the local people there, the native inhabitants, would actually do ceremony there. This was witnessed by Spanish explorers and missionaries in the 1600s.
Incredible.
And written about. Unfortunately, because of the good old Christian missionaries, all pagan things got destroyed over there. So
wipe it.
There's nothing left to see, unfortunately. So you do find weird little examples in the Americas like that, as you do in Britain. I mean, you could do multiple comparisons between sites, but I think we have to kind of look at it from different perspectives. Not only geometry, which is hidden. You find that hidden within sites. You find often things that you have to build from what's there. You find other things associated with it. Obviously, you get the astronomical alignments, what you specialize in. Also, you have like the earth energies, and you have the kind of the links between one site to another, the geodesy or geodesy between sites, which is often part of a greater complex. And so there's multiple invisible kind of technologies at these sites which you can just about decipher today. Although, to be honest with you, most of them in North America have been destroyed now.
And the reason I mentioned the complexity and the sacred geometry, I mean, and I'm going to come back to the anatomy of the giants, but I wanted to mention this because this may seem like an obvious statement, but it has to be said that this beckons that these giants, if these are associated with the mounds and that the mound builders were giants, or maybe that's too much of a reach at this point, it certainly looks that way and it indicates that. But this beckons that these guys were intelligent, I mean, sophisticatedly.
Yes, I totally agree. Yes, absolutely. You cannot deny that. This is one of the reasons why the Smithsonian and people before then championed this lost race theory in North America, because they couldn't believe the current Native Americans they were witnessing had the capabilities, or certainly their ancestors had the capabilities to build such structures and to have such advanced geometry and astronomy and other things encoded within them. It's the sheer magnitude of them as well. And so this lost race theory was going around for a long time until it became there's a lot of politics involved in that. We cover that in the book in the Smithsonian Files chapter in much more detail, why that changed, who changed it, what were the triggers for that. But that was what was originally thought by a lot of people until it was realised that certainly the Native Americans, that were just as advanced when looked into properly, but they were treated like savages, and it was disgusting. And the whole manifest destiny agenda, and as you have people like Hudlichka involved. It was a real troubled time, and there's a lot of guilt and kind of weird energy about that now, but. Yeah, but there's certainly multiple levels of civilization going back over huge epochs of time, perhaps even 10,000 years in North America. And these giants were most certainly involved. And it's quite possible that many of these early giant discoverers were Native American. But there's lots of different types of human, they think, now were present in North America, which is another thing we tackle in the book as well.
Sure. Let's bring Jim back in here. Jim, let's talk anatomy. I know I talked about the intelligence of these beings. Let's talk anatomy, just pure anatomy. I mean, we're talking 7 feet and above is technically a giant, but most of these are a lot more than 7 foot. Is that correct?
Yeah. The thought is, when you talk about building, like the Adena people, one of the first mound building cultures in the U.S., probably started around 500 BC. They were known to, and it's fairly recognized by professionals, that the men were upwards of 7 foot tall, the women were over 6 feet tall. They had a royal class that elongated their skulls that you find in the mounds. But we're not talking about like the entire country was littered with, just giant people everywhere. It seemed like more of a royal class of giants in the U.S. that you find buried in the burial mounds. Then you have intrusive burials after the fact of normal-sized Native Americans later on. Mm-hmm. But, the ancient breeding, kept them alive. But where did they come from? Edgar Casey would say they came from Atlantis, and that the native people are really a melting pot of different cultures. And they had a massive cranial capacity. The dimensions that I mentioned over and over again are well out of normal range. Jawbones being fit over the head of the finder, enormous skulls that could be worn like a helmet, thigh bones that correspond to 8-9 foot humans that are, in proportional in size. So that's the thing that's so intriguing is over and over again you have mentions of enormous proportional humans by respected individuals and things like that. It was on display. Everybody in town was aghast. Hundreds of people visited. And then we, Hugh and I, like in the show, we're trying to hunt down where the skeletons are. And it's such an interesting story. And when somebody asks, where are the bones? I would say that's a Smithsonian question. Where are the bones that are mentioned to be 7 foot and taller in all their accounts? Are they 5'6" somewhere? No, they're nowhere to be found. Some did crumble to dust because it was so ancient. That's reported over and over again. But
Wow.
it is not. Oh yeah. Crumble to dust like the ancient sites.
Incredible.
When the explorers came to the U.S., there were burial mounds that could have gone up to like 8,000 or 10,000 years old that were never touched by human hands. So obviously, the Native Americans never touched them. And then over like a 120-year period, they were just devastated and dug into by treasure hunters. And bones were used for road fill. And like, if we were to stop time right now and go back and then have like competent archaeologists explore all the mound sites, I'm assured that you would find unbelievably huge humans and amazing things, but it was this weird happening where the colonists came in and obliterated what was here and had no respect and farmed and stole everything, and so it's very problematic. Human skeletons are not a renewable resource.
Sure.
But the bottom line is there were highly sophisticated culture in the U.S. that are just not known about. And is that a conspiracy? I would say it's a conspiracy of ignorance and racism. In our culture, frankly, in the U.S. particularly, it's so off course. We're just flying over a cliff. When you had people who stewarded the land for over 10,000 years, and now in a couple hundred years, we've just done this horrible number on the environment, dehumanized people, and created a really despicable culture that's greedy and separate and does not work together. So people, I would say you guys probably look more to the Druids and the indigenous people who had it right.
Yeah.
And we're like, it's the fall of the Roman Empire here in the U.S. where people are like looking to indigenous wisdom to try to like create an example of how humans should live together in cooperative ways. What worked for them? How do you harness the Earth's energy with, say, megalithic points or like acupuncture meridians and acupuncture points to create peace and harmony? So I think that's why people have such an interest in this. It's not about giants. It's about ancient cultures, and as you know well, wizardry and sorcery, like white magic, basically. How do we get our act back together as humans?
Jim, I'm just thinking here, in a way, the giants of America got eradicated twice. They got physically eradicated, and then their memory got eradicated by the Smithsonian. They got it 2 times over.
Holocaust of the Giants is one of Ross's books and takes on it. Exactly. It was an obliteration of them, like physically and psychically, and an eradication or a marginalization of them, even though it's right there in historical record. It's a good point. What do they represent? Are they malevolent creatures like it's talked about in the Bible? Are they, beings of wisdom that, when you talk about Veracocha and all the legends of Atlantis, the Aztec and the Maya, I think they were both. Just like, I think, another thing that I found is Atlantis seems to be a viable reality. It's so many mystics and different sources talk about it. And Plato, the entire body of wisdom was based on the truth. And he said 3 different times that he is truly reporting that Atlantis existed through Solon and the priests of Sais and the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons will say the same thing. I really think there was some validity to a lost civilization. And now, as alternative researchers, we can hang our hat on a place like Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, yeah.
10,000 BC. It may be older. There may be more there. But it is a fascinating, complex, sophisticated megalithic site. And I think it's great that I work with Hugh and Andrew Collins, who are 2 of, say 5 most knowledgeable researchers on the site, and Graham Hancock too. And it's a great thing for people who want to think differently about the past. It's like, okay, the skeptics, you were amazingly wrong about this and ridiculed Graham Hancock to no end and Robert Schoch and others. Now what do you have to say? Where's the list of apologies?
Yeah.
It turns to like, oh, these idiots are on the History Channel looking for giants, and there's no proof there. It's an idiotic theory. And we would say, in the creation of our book, for any objectively reasonable person, will read through it and say, wow, what a story. That needs further investigation. And so I am glad every interview you and I talk about Göbekli Tepe, because it's like, it is orthodoxy proven extremely wrong.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Jim, because, and this ties back into giants, funny enough, with T-shaped megaliths, you knows what's coming next. I'm going to talk about the island of Tory, not too far from where I live in the northwest of Ireland. They have T-shaped megaliths there as well. Of course, in Menorca, they have them as well. So Göbekli Tepe, Menorca, and in the northwest of Ireland. But you got to come over sometime and check out Tory Island with me, Hugh. I'm not going on my own. But it's bizarre that we have these legends of the Fomorians, these giants. They were known of men of giant stature, sometimes even called Cyclopean. But Balor of the Evil Eye was one of them. He had his own name. He was known to the other inhabitants of Ireland. Apparently they wrote down there was 20,000 giants living on the island of Tory. It was their stronghold.
And we have to go there. My God. Yes.
Yeah, it's not too far from you. I mean, we'll get you over here some point. We'll do an interview and we'll go on a little road trip for sure. It's definitely a research. I've always wanted to go. I really have. And bizarrely, they're their own entity up there as well. They have their own king of the island, and he greets you. He greets every person who lands on the island. It's a strange setup, but yeah. They just don't recognise the rest of Ireland. It's bizarre. It's like they still consider themselves their own people.
It's a bit like the Isle of Man, I guess. Where they have their own sovereignty and everything.
Yeah, exactly. But this is the legends, and I want to bring in legends again. I'm going to jump around a bit, but I mean the Titans, the Fomorians in Ireland, the Ogs, King of Bashan in biblical sense. Nordic traditions have the ice giants. What is it about the legends? I don't think all these places could independently invent a giant mythology. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think we're brought up with these giants. I think multiple different cultures have them, and they're often in children's stories. So we get brought up with it. So we kind of imagine it's all just fairy tales. We imagine it's all just stories read to your children and things like that to scare you a little bit with fee fi fo farm, etc., etc. But I think there's obviously, I think they're partly based on something, and I mean it's not that big a stretch to no pun intended, to imagine that humans were bigger in the past. I mean, look at dinosaurs, look at the megafauna, look at even like the different plant life and trees and things like this. Things were bigger. Animal life, human life was probably bigger. So what's the big deal? I mean, we go into some theories about that, but the fact is, you find remarkably similar legends in all different parts of the world, much like you do with the megaliths. You have cannibalistic giants. This is something that you get in England with Jack the Giant Slayer and other stories, being chased and eaten by these huge giant trolls and so on and so forth. In America, you get the same kind of legends in many different Native American traditions. Wow. And there's physical evidence of cannibalistic activities taking place in North America. We have it in the book, Nevada, and various other places. And you get the same kind of stories all over the world, being terrified and hunted by these giants.
Wow.
And they attribute them, obviously, one of the strongest connections, as we mentioned earlier, is the link with megalithic sites. Always get that link. And so, it makes sense. If you've got someone who's 10 or 12 feet tall, they're going to much easier to be able to lift a heavier stone than me or you. So, I think it's just a case of retraining the mind a little bit. And when you get enough evidence in front of you, and this is what we try to do with the book, you can't dismiss it. It's really hard to dismiss that amount of evidence. It's just too much, and so it makes you it triggers. It's like what we did when I read Ross's book years ago. It triggers something in you, and I think you have to reflect that around the world. And it becomes a very strange kind of obsession, kind of passion. But I'm desperate to go to this island now. You mentioned it. There's got to be a few bones.
Well, when you do, we're going to take you to the Giant's Ring Henge in Belfast as well. It's the largest henge in Ireland, and it's the only henge with a dolmen in the centre of it as well. And it's like a hybrid monument. It's like I somehow think, and a lot of people think this in megalithic Ireland anyway. I don't know because we just think that the henge builders were the giants, and there was another group, either the Tuatha De Danann or they were building the megalithic chambers, and that there was crossbreeding. We have genealogy tables from the Irish manuscripts saying that they were breeding with the giants. They beat down the giants eventually, and then they were beating themselves. And there was, I mean, we have Angus Mac Og, son of Og, Angus son of Og, and he's a descendant of an Og, and he was originally a hybrid between one race and the giants. So why would you defeat them in battle and then interbreed with them? You know, it's just not a story you make up. You know, there's so many specifics in there, and then they have numbers of these people that were defeated, and it's the level of detail. It's like a Dan Brown science fiction thing, but from like 7th century. It's like there's so much detail there that it's got some sort of tangibility to it.
Well, maybe that's another theory to consider. Like, you know, because people say, where did the American giants come from? Perhaps they all came from Ireland.
Maybe persecuted you. Maybe they were persecuted here and they just upped and left and went.
Yeah. I mean, we've not really looked into that angle on things, but yeah, we should put our heads together about that, because that's a very interesting perspective. Because a lot of people say, oh, they came from Bible lands, the Nephilim and all that kind of stuff. Others say they came from the Pacific, or, you know, through the Bering Land Bridge and so forth. But, you know, there's other options to consider.
I know, and I know you do a lot on that, Hugh. Let's tap into that, and I'll bring you Jim, in a second. But we're looking at a global scale system here. We're looking at global megalithic monuments, and I think it's very hard to say who started where and where they went to, because if you look at Carroll Moore, 5400 BC, it's a very early monument. You look at the Sumerian civilization, and if you want to talk Anunnaki, Nephilim, Ogs, and the biblical, the Amorites, I mean, it's very hard to say who came first. I think when you need to look at the global picture, it's a global culture, civilization who were able to get to and from places.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. I think a lot of people kind of, especially when you're talking about North America, people just assume that everyone came into North America. There was no origin point in the Americas or North America, and we challenge that now. We've got a whole segment in the book, in the final chapter, where we look at the origins of these giants within North America itself, and there's actually some big changes taking place in anthropology and archaeology now. People are realizing that it wasn't just Africa where the humans originated. It could have been different continents as well. And speciation took place not only in Africa but also in the Americas and other places. Even Dr. Shara Bailey, who we interviewed for the TV show in the book, who's a dental anthropologist at New York University, she did a brilliant lecture I watched just recently, pointing that out, that is now what people are thinking, what academia is starting to think, and it makes sense, because that fits in with many Native American creation myths and traditions coming down from Great Spirit. And we have multiple accounts of different legends and mythological stories we put in the book.
Bring back Jim here. Jim, you have a section on curious artifacts in the book, and I bring in something tangible for the audience here, because this can sometimes, I mean, I want to mention the metallurgy. That maybe also typify what we're talking about, because we seem to have this copper industry kicking off in America that most likely, I think there's evidence that it probably fueled the Bronze Age culture of Europe.
Yeah, there's up the upper peninsula in Michigan, there were massive amounts of mining that took place thousands of years ago. There's different estimates, either between 100 million or like 500 million tons of copper were excavated. And it's basically, where the hell did it go? You know, the Native Americans were, they highly valued it. You see their artifacts everywhere, but it does not account for what happened to that vast amount of it. And it's a real conundrum, because you would think if it's going all through Europe, you would have a lot of European artifacts found at the site, you know, but the planet is filled with strange mining operations, like in South Africa, that, you know, seem to go back even further than we can conceive of. And it's just another strange twist, you know, the connection between the missing copper and the mining culture and giants. And actually, there's a giant handprint that was on the cover of Ancient American magazine that is embedded in the upper lakes. It's really interesting.
Wow.
You know, when you get into curious artifacts, you find there are tablets that were found by Smithsonian scientists, the Bat Creek and the Grave Creek tablets. There are lots of controversy surrounding them. The Brush Creek tablet it disappeared. There was a lot of thought that maybe this is a key to diffusionism happening in a collaboration between other cultures and the mound builders. And we find accounts of brass artifacts and different writing, Roman writing and hieroglyphics. And it's a fascinating chapter because it's right there in the historical record of these strange things that were found and described. And it's just another really interesting twist on what was this culture all about? Where did it really come from? Where did the mound builders come from? Where did Native Americans come from? And we hit that with different from lots of angles and different possibilities. But just another interesting twist, these matter-of-fact accounts of strange brass objects and hieroglyphs in strange writing over and over again, oftentimes associated with enormous skeletons. It's quite a thing. And we hit it in the final chapter that several accounts of gigantic skeletons with casks of corn seeds. And when they dug up the skeleton, one that was 60 feet down, they took the corn seed and they planted it, and it was an unbelievable yielder. Very, very interesting stuff like that. Like, what was this culture all about? What do they, were these gigantic leaders just enormously talented and ingenious and intelligent because of the cranial capacity?
Incredible. We got oversized tools as well. I think this is if you want to mention that, I just think this is incredible. I mean, I'm sorry, if you got an oversized tool and humans can't really lift or find it very difficult to lift, I mean, we got these little beacons flashing on us going, please look at this story.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's 33-pound axes, I think, and stuff like this, which is insane. It's really insane. You can't wield it. Our research colleague and friend Mike Ewers, who helped us gather data for the book, he actually I think he acquired an axe of a certain weight. I think mine's about half that weight. And he found it incredibly difficult to do, and he was doing tests with it and things like this. But one of the things he researched, and we mentioned briefly in the book, is the fact that the taller you are, you get an increased body strength, and you can actually carry heavier things and be generally stronger. And Native Americans are supposed to be stronger than their colonial counterparts a couple of hundred years ago. And this is all tested and put to the test and everything. So, but you get that in England. You get this giant axes found in Kent. There's one at the Great Orme mines in Wales, even in Sheringham and other places. So there's quite a few examples. We've got a few examples in the book. There's ones that Smithsonian were involved in finding in Sape Mound in Ohio, which we visited in 2012, which they think partly probably ceremonial. But some of the ones we've got in there they clearly were used, but they were worn out, they were worn down, and there are legends and stories that talk about giants clearing entire forests, in one fell swoop, and creating the plains of America and things like this.
Yeah, can I jump in?
Please.
In South Africa, about 3 years ago, Oxford scientists found enormous hand axes. I mean, utterly gigantic, 4 of them, in the lowest level of the basin, mixed with 10,000 regular-sized artifacts, and they just don't know what to make of it. There are pictures on the internet, Oxford scientists, South Africa, giant hand axes. You'll see a picture of them. They still don't know what to make of them. They're utterly fascinating. They're worn and worked. And this occurs all around the world, Australia, England, Morocco, the United States. Giant tools along with giant skeleton accounts and giant reports and giant legends. It is a comparative mythologist would say, if landed on this planet, know nothing about human history, would say, well, in the past there was an advanced civilization, there was high technology, there were giant people, there were little people, and there was a cataclysmic destruction in 10,000 BC. That would be the conclusion if they were to do a study of comparative mythology, if somebody didn't know anything. Because all around the world, they're all saying the same thing. It's like the earth is flat here with our scientists. We don't look at oral traditions. We're all saying the same thing. We're all pointing in the same direction. can it really be that that's the case? That it's like they're all wrong? It's insane. And I'll add that all the secret societies are saying the same thing too. It's utterly remarkable, and you can deal with all the ridicule and people. Galileo's under house arrest. I would rather side with oral traditions than compromise academic filters. Frankly.
Sure. Wow. Guys, we're at the top of the first hour. We're going to run over a little bit, but not too much. But just take a moment and give out the websites. I know you've got Giants on Record on Facebook, but you got another website there. You've got a few. So give them out and where people can get the copy of the book, plus give the name of the book as well.
Yeah, sure. The name of the book is Giants on Record. This one here. America's Hidden History, Secrets in the Mound, and the Smithsonian Files, the subtitle. People can just Google it, they can find it on Amazon all around the world.
Sure.
We've got a hardback coming out shortly, a sort of special hardback edition. This is paperback, and we have Kindle versions, ebook versions. And yes, facebook.com/Giants on Record is where we put all our updates.
Yeah.
Jim and I are both speaking at the Origins Conference.
I'm going to see you guys there, for sure.
Excellent. On the 7th of November in London, people can get tickets for that, andrewcollins.com. There's just a few left. We're going to have a sellout there, we think. We're going to be signing the hardback editions there, limited edition ones, so people can grab them there. Also going to be in Glastonbury on the 10th of November, doing a free lecture at the Assembly Rooms and book signing, both me and Jim. And then we're both in America on the 14th of November at the COSM, or the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors in New York. And also in Jim's local town of Ashfield, Massachusetts, on the night of the 17th at the lovely Elmer's, which is a cafe store in town there. So we're pretty busy. People can also check out megalithomania.co.uk. That's going to have all the updates on there. Plus, that's my website as well.
Oh, awesome, guys. And I'm definitely going to see you at the Origins Conference. I'm looking forward to seeing you too, Jim. Great to see you over this part of the world. I think you're going to get a warm welcome, and it's such a great conference. I just watch it going every year. I'm just glad to be a part of it this year and get there. I've missed it last year, but got a great lineup. Looking forward to getting my signed copy of the book too, guys. I know you've been to the Far East as well. Don't we have giant pots out there or giant stone vases that are bizarre?
Yes,